You know the feeling. You haven't argued. Nothing went wrong. They didn't say anything cruel or critical or even particularly strange. But 20 minutes after leaving their company, you are exhausted in a way that a full conversation with someone else never makes you. Your shoulders dropped somewhere on the drive home. Your chest feels slightly heavier than it did before. You need to sit alone for an hour just to feel like yourself again. And the part that makes it so confusing, so quietly maddening, is that you can't explain it to anyone without sounding dramatic. Because nothing happened. They were perfectly pleasant. On paper, it was a fine interaction. But your body logged something that your words can't quite reach. Here's what nobody tells you about this experience. You are not imagining it. You are not being unfair. What you felt was real, measurable, and it has a precise psychological and neurological explanation. The science behind why certain people cost you energy simply by existing in the same room as you is far more concrete and far more fascinating than most people realize. Today we are going to decode exactly why this happens, what is actually being transmitted between people without a single word being spoken, and what it means for the relationships you choose to keep. What is actually being transferred? The first thing to understand is that human communication is almost never primarily verbal. Research from psychologist Albert Mehrabian established decades ago that the vast majority of emotional meaning between people is carried not in words, but in tone, facial micro-expression, body posture, and the rhythm of breathing. We process all of this constantly, automatically, below the threshold of conscious awareness. Your brain is running a continuous background scan of everyone around you. It is reading the tension in someone's jaw before they speak. It is registering the half-second of hesitation before they smile. It is clocking the slight shallowness of their breath, the rigidity in their shoulders, the way their eyes move when they say they're fine. You are not doing this deliberately. You cannot turn it off. It happens the way your pupils adjust to light, automatically, entirely outside your control. This system exists because for most of human history, reading the emotional state of the people around you was a survival skill. A calm group meant safety. A tense group meant danger was near. The brain that could detect hidden threat in someone's posture before it became visible threat in their behavior was the brain that stayed alive. The problem is that this ancient, finely tuned detection system doesn't distinguish between a predator in the bushes and a person who carries chronic anxiety, unresolved resentment, or deep inner conflict into every room they enter. It treats both the same way. It reads the signal, activates a low-level stress response, and begins quietly mobilizing your resources. You don't feel this as fear. You feel it as tiredness. The invisible emotional climate. Every person carries what psychologists call an emotional baseline, a default internal state that colors every interaction, regardless of what they actually say. Someone with a stable, regulated baseline creates a kind of calm field around them. You have likely experienced this with certain people. You feel more grounded near them, more able to think clearly, somehow more yourself. Their presence is genuinely restorative. But a person carrying chronic emotional dysregulation, unprocessed stress, suppressed anger, persistent anxiety they've learned to mask, broadcasts a very different signal. And here is the part that matters. They don't have to express any of it. The masking doesn't cancel the signal. It only changes the channel it travels on. Neuroscientists call this co-regulation, the process by which nervous systems influence each other through proximity and nonverbal cues. It is one of the most fundamental mechanisms of human social biology. We don't just share space with people, we attune to them. Our heart rate, cortisol levels, and autonomic nervous system activity all shift in response to the physiological state of those around us. A regulated nervous system near a dysregulated one doesn't automatically pull the dysregulated one into calm. More often, it works the other way. The dysregulated state is louder, biologically speaking. It broadcasts at higher intensity, and your nervous system, faithful to its ancient programming, moves toward the more urgent signal. This is why it costs you something. You are not just sensing their state. Your body is doing the work of stabilizing in response to it, even while the conversation stays perfectly light. The people who cost the most. Not all draining people operate the same way, but the ones who cost the most energy tend to share a specific quality. Not cruelty, not malice, but a particular kind of emotional unavailability that demands constant calibration from everyone around them. Think about the person in your life who never directly expresses a negative emotion, but somehow makes the emotional temperature of every room shift the moment they arrive. Nothing is ever explicitly wrong, but something always feels like it might be. You find yourself monitoring them, watching for signals, softening your words slightly, adjusting your energy, making yourself smaller or lighter or more careful than you would naturally be. This is called walking on eggshells, and it has a real neurological cost. The chronic low-level vigilance required to stay attuned to someone's unexpressed emotional state is metabolically expensive. It draws on the same cognitive resources as focused concentration. By the end of an hour with someone like this, your brain has done significant invisible work, all of it social and emotional, none of it apparent from the outside. What makes it so hard to name is that these people are often not aware of what they're transmitting. The chronic anxiety, the unresolved grief, the simmering resentment that never quite surfaces, they have often lived with these states so long, they have stopped noticing them. The signal is real. The sender is genuinely unconscious of it, and that makes it nearly impossible to address directly without sounding like you're accusing someone of something they didn't do. What it does to you over time. One draining interaction is nothing. The body recovers, the nervous system resets, and within a day, you are back to yourself. But the relationships that feature this dynamic regularly, the family member you see every week, the colleague in the next office, the friend whose struggles you've been absorbing for years, those relationships leave a longer mark. Research on empathic overload shows that sustained exposure to another person's unprocessed emotional state gradually erodes what psychologists call affect regulation, your own ability to manage and return to emotional equilibrium. You become, over time, slightly less able to regulate yourself, slightly more reactive, slightly more easily destabilized by things that wouldn't have touched you before. The cruelest part is that this happens precisely to people with the most finely tuned social awareness, the ones who are most capable of sensing what others are feeling, most willing to absorb it, most committed to staying present even when it costs them. The capacity that makes you good at relationships is the exact same capacity that makes you vulnerable to this particular kind of invisible drain. What you can actually do. You cannot stop reading people. That system is not optional. But you can change what you do with what you read. The first shift is the most important one. Learn to distinguish between their state and your responsibility. When you feel the weight of someone else's unspoken tension, your nervous system is not asking you to fix it. It is simply reporting what it detected. You are allowed to notice what is in a room without making it yours to resolve. Recognition is not the same as obligation. The second shift is physical before it is psychological. When you feel yourself beginning to attune to someone else's dysregulated state, the fastest way back to your own baseline is through the body, not through thought. Slow your breathing deliberately. Feel the weight of your feet on the floor. These are not small or symbolic gestures. They are direct inputs to your autonomic nervous system, signals that override the co-regulation pull and anchor you back inside your own physiological state. The third shift is the hardest, honest inventory of which relationships are costing more than they are returning, and giving yourself permission to adjust your proximity accordingly. Not every relationship can be fixed, and not every person who drains you is doing something wrong. But you are allowed to notice the pattern. You are allowed to protect your own nervous system without requiring the other person to be a villain first. Some people will always cost you more than the interaction seems to warrant. Now you know it isn't in your head, it's in your nervous system, doing exactly what it was built to do. The question was never whether you were imagining it. The question was always what to do with the knowledge once you had it. If someone specific came to mind while reading this, drop a comment. You don't have to name them, just say what the feeling is. Someone else is carrying the same one right now and doesn't know it yet. If this gave you language for something you couldn't quite explain before, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. Sometimes, the most useful thing you can offer another person is a frame that finally makes their experience make sense.